Have you ever wondered what secret lies in the nooks and crannies of history? Over the centuries, history books have left out details that are as surprising as they are fascinating. In this video, we bring you 15 strange and impressive facts that you probably were never told. If this is your first time on the channel, subscribe now so you don't miss any important content about the darkest chapters of our history. The Roman army and rabbits. The Romans are known for their powerful armies, but did you know that a Roman invasion was halted by a rabbit plague? This occurred in Hispania, what is now Spain, during the Roman conquest. The rabbits, which were very prolific in the region, became such a big problem that even the army had to take a break to deal with them. These small animals temporarily interrupted the Romans' ambitions. The king who was crowned twice. In the history of England, there is a strange case. King Henry VI was crowned not once, but twice, something completely unusual. The first coronation occurred when he was only 9 months old, after his father's death. But years later, due to the civil war known as the Wars of the Roses, Henry was overthrown and then restored to the throne. He was crowned a second time, but his reign wouldn't last much longer. The queen who slept surrounded by corpses. Isabel Bathory, the Blood Countess, is not only famous for her cruelty but also supposedly believed that bathing in the blood of young virgins would keep her young. While some details of her story are exaggerated, it has been confirmed that she was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of girls and women. Bathory didn't just kill, she tortured her victims in her castle, surrounded by their corpses. She was arrested and confined to her castle until her death, becoming one of the most prolific serial killers in history. The poisonous fashion of the Victorian era. During the 19th century, fashion in England was obsessed with the color green. This shade, known as Paris green, was used in dresses, curtains, and even toys. What people didn't know was that this pigment contained arsenic, a deadly poison. Women and children wearing these garments started getting sick without knowing why. It was a silent epidemic that claimed many lives until the dangerous connection was finally discovered. The horse that was a senator in ancient Rome. Emperor Caligula is known for his eccentricity, but one of his strangest decisions was appointing his horse, Incitatus, as a senator. While some historians believe this was a joke or a provocation to the Senate, the fact remains incredibly strange. Incitatus had his own marble stable and a diet worthy of an emperor, showing the extent of the power and madness Caligula reached. The Titanic was not the only tragic sinking. We all know the tragic story of the Titanic, but there was another shipwreck that was even more devastating. In 1945, the German ship Wilhelm Gustloff was sunk by a Soviet submarine during World War II. On board were over 10,000 refugees, and more than 9,000 people died in the attack, making it the deadliest maritime disaster in history. However, this fact has been overshadowed by the fame of the Titanic. Aerial battles in World War I were considered chivalrous. Aerial battles in World War I were not only brutal but were initially considered acts of chivalry. Pilots flying in rudimentary planes often exchanged greetings and respected unwritten combat rules. Some pilots even reportedly threw flowers at the funerals of their fallen opponents in the air. This courtesy would quickly disappear with the advancement of the war and the brutality it brought. The CIA's secret human experiments during the Cold War. The CIA conducted a secret experiment known as MK-Ultra, which involved testing drugs like LSD on US citizens without their consent. The goal was to study mind control and develop psychological manipulation techniques. Many of the victims suffered permanent psychological damage, and some even died. This covert experiment remains one of the darkest stains in the history of the US government. The Civil War battle that was a picnic. During the American Civil War, a peculiar event occurred where civilians went to watch a battle while having a picnic. At the First Battle of Bull Run, residents of Washington, D.C., arrived with picnic baskets to observe what they thought would be a quick victory for the Union Army. However, when the battle became chaotic, the spectators were trapped in the violence and many had to flee in terror. The witch hunts in Europe were more brutal than in the United States. While the most famous witch hunts in history tend to be the ones in Salem, Massachusetts, The truth is that Europe was much more brutal in this aspect. In the 16th and 17th centuries, thousands of people were executed in Europe under accusations of witchcraft. Countries like Germany and Switzerland saw execution numbers that far exceeded those of the American colonies. The mystery of the tropical Antarctica. Antarctica is known as an icy continent, but in 2012, scientists discovered remnants of an ancient tropical forest buried under the ice. These fossils date back millions of years when Antarctica was much farther north and enjoyed a warm climate. This discovery reminds us that the geography of our planet has dramatically changed over the millennia. The strange king of France who couldn't speak until he was 7. Louis XIV, known as the Sun King of France, is famous for his long reign and for building the extravagant palace of Versailles. But a curious fact about his childhood is that he didn't speak until he was 7 years old. Though the reason behind his late speech is a mystery, some historians believe it may have been caused by the trauma he suffered during the Fronde, a series of civil wars that broke out during his childhood. The deadly game of the Aztecs. The Aztecs played a ball game called Tlaxli, but it wasn't just entertainment. Sometimes, the losing team players were sacrificed to the gods. These executions were seen as an honor, as they believed the blood of the sacrificed would nourish the gods and ensure the world's well-being. Tlaxli was literally a life-or-death sport. The Cardiff Giant hoax of 1869. In 1869, in New York, a supposed skeleton of a human giant over 3 meters tall was found. The news spread like wildfire, and thousands of people paid to see it. However, it turned out to be an elaborate hoax. The giant was actually a sculpture made of plaster buried by a man named George who created it to mock preachers who claimed that biblical giants existed. The Donner Party's cannibalistic feast. The infamous group of pioneers known as the Donner Party became trapped in the Sierra Nevada mountains in 1846, and what followed was one of the most chilling stories in U.S. history. After being isolated by snow and running out of food, the members of the group resorted to cannibalism to survive. Some of them killed their weaker companions and ate their bodies. This macabre story shows the darkest side of human nature in extreme situations. History is full of strange and impressive details that are often overlooked. These 15 facts remind us that the past is much more complex, fascinating, and sometimes extravagant than we've been taught. If you've made it this far and learned something new with our stories, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss our next videos. Together we can discover and remember the truths that history often tries to hide.